Welcome back. All right, so I want to do a career video today. I want to do a video on Darryl Sitler. Of course, recently Borje Salming passing. We know Darryl Sitler and Salming were lifelong friends. And I wanted to get into Darryl Sitler's career because it is fascinating. I talked a lot about Darryl Sitler's career when I did a video a couple of years ago on Harold Ballard and all of the awfulness of Harold Ballard. There's a movie coming out on Harold Ballard, by the way, which I'm sure will really get into the awfulness and how terrible a person he really was. But Darryl Sitler had to deal with that. And he was drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs 8th overall in 1970. And it's an era where the Toronto Maple Leafs are generally, in terms of their position in the league, well, they had won the Cup in 67. So when he's drafted in 70, it's only a few years removed. And they had some good years during the 70s, did not get to the Stanley Cup final. And of course, they have not been to the Stanley Cup final since 67. And the way that this team was run by owner Harold Ballard was a big part of the problem. And Darryl Sitler would eventually have run-ins with management. But to start with, things are pretty good. So 70-71, straight out of the draft, he plays for Toronto. 49 games, 10 goals, 8 assists, 18 points. In the playoffs, in 6 games, he adds 2 goals and an assist. So first season out of the way, right? 71-72, plays 74 games. 15 goals, 17 assists, 32 points. So you're seeing that progression, right? Not a huge jump in points or goals or anything, but that progression's there. In the playoffs, 3 games played, does not record a point. 72-73, 78 games played, 29 goals, 48 assists, 77 points. So nice jump in points there for him, more than doubles them. Only played 4 extra games. And so, yeah, Sittler's arrived. 73-74, he really breaks out. 78 games, 38 goals, which was 9th overall in the NHL that year, to go with 46 assists for 84 points, which is 8th overall in the NHL that year. In the playoffs, 4 games, 2 goals, an assist for 3 points. He was 9th in Hart voting that year. So, top 10 in Hart voting, he would be there again. Not 74-75, though. He played 72 games, 36 goals, so only a drop of 2, 44 assists, 80 points. So he's not top 10 that year. In the playoffs, he adds 2 goals and an assist for 3 points in 7 games. He did play in the All-Star game that year. That's his first All-Star game appearance. 75-76 and 79 games played. Scores 41 goals, 59 assists, 100 points. That 100 points, 9th overall in the NHL that year. And, the start of something, right? He's a star now. 10 games, 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points in the playoffs. He was 9th in Hart voting again. And he's named captain when Davey Keon leaves. Now, Davey Keon leaving the team is worthy of a video on its own on Dave Keon's career. The Toronto Maple Leafs did not have a great relationship with their star players at this point, and Keon's exit would create issues for a very long time between Keon and the team. So this is a thing, but Sitler is captain, doing pretty well. 76-77, 73 games, 38 goals, which was 8th overall. 52 assists, 90 points. The 90 points was 8th overall as well. 9 games in the playoffs, 5 goals, 16 assists for 21 points. He was 9th in the Hart voting, but 21 points in 9 playoff games, it's not bad. So Sittler's really just showing, how good he can be, and then he has a career year in 77-78. 80 games, 45 goals, which is 6th overall in the NHL, 72 assists, which is 2nd overall in the NHL, 117 points, which is 3rd overall in the National Hockey League. 13 games in the playoffs, 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points. Played in the All-Star game. He's a second-team All-Star, and he was 3rd in the Hart voting that year. Behind, I believe it was Dion and Trottier. Could have been Lafleur and Trottier. Anyways, that's pretty heady territory right there, right? This, of course, is pre-Gretzky. So, yeah. The league would be put on notice a couple years later, but for 77-78, it's a pretty good year. Things should be good in Toronto. 78-79, 70 games played, 36 goals, 51 assists, 87 points. 6 games played in the playoffs, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points. So it is 79-80 where things start to get kind of really iffy. July of 1979, Punch Imlach is hired as general manager. And Punch Imlach believed that Darryl Sitler had too much influence on the team, and he had too much influence on things in general. There was also an appearance by Sitler and Paul Mateer on a TV show that the team didn't like and didn't agree with. So the idea was, well, we want to trade him. But Alan Eagleson informed the team it would cost them $500,000 to get him traded. He had a no-trade clause. So keep that in mind, squirrel that one away, because December 29th of 1979, they traded Lanny McDonald to the Colorado Rockies because they couldn't trade Darryl Sittler. So it was just, that whole phrase, biting off your nose to spite your face? Yeah, that's exactly what they were doing here. So 79-80, despite everything, 73 games played, 40 goals, 57 assists, which is 8th overall in the NHL, 97 points, which is 9th overall. Nothing short of heroic, considering they traded his best friend, and there's plenty of reasons to be concerned off ice. 3 games played in the playoffs, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, played in the All-Star game, and he was 8th in the Hart voting. Oh, and also, Sitler resigned as captain when they traded Lanny McDonald, which Harold Ballard said is the equivalent of burning the Canadian flag. It's not, but okay. 80-81, 80 games played, 42 goals, 53 assists, 95 points. So we have seen players play poorly when they want to get traded or when they're not getting along with the organization. That was not the case with Darryl Sittler. He was a consummate pro when he went out on the ice. In the playoffs, played 3 games that year, no points. But 81-82, he sees the writing on the wall. So he still has a poor relationship with basically everybody. Now, Punch Imlach was relieved of duties as general manager. Harold Ballard felt that his health wasn't in where it needed to be for him to actually run the team. So Sitler goes to the team in November of 81 and says he's willing to be traded to either the Minnesota North Stars or the Philadelphia Flyers. He plays 38 games with Toronto, 18 goals, 20 assists, 38 points. Harold Ballard had said no to the first trade offer from Philly, but he takes the second. On January 20th, Darryl Sittler is traded for Rich Costello, a 1982 second, which was used to draft Peter Inachak, and Ken Strong was the future considerations that became a player. Future considerations sometimes actually become something. Back in the day, it used to. It was basically like, if you're a baseball fan, player to be named later. It was like that. Eventually, the NHL said, yeah, you guys need to stop that. So he goes to Philly. 81-82, 35 games after the trade, 14 goals, 18 assists, 32 points. In the playoffs, he adds 3 goals and an assist for 4 points in 4 games. And hey, the Cooperalls are great, so why not go to Philly? 82-83, 80 games played, 43 goals, 40 assists, 83 points. In the playoffs, 3 games played, just the 1 goal, but he does go to the All-Star game for what would be the final time in his career. So 75-76 rolls around, 76 games, 27 goals, 36 assists, 63 points. 3 games played in the playoffs, 2 assists. So things are still going pretty well for him, right? And he gets told, we're going to name you team captain. You're going to be the captain of the Flyers. Then new bench boss Bobby Clarke, or new general manager Bobby Clarke, decides to do something else on that same day that he was to be named captain, and trades him to Detroit. Detroit in 84-85 is not what Detroit would become later. And so in his memoirs, Darryl Sittler said this was rough for him. This was not great. He was going to be named captain, and then they traded him. He's traded for Murray Craven and Joe Patterson. Now, Craven was an excellent pickup for Philadelphia, but for a future Hall of Famer, that had to be a tough one. So he goes to Detroit for 84-85. 61 games played, 11 goals, 16 assists, 27 points. In the playoffs, he adds 2 assists in 2 games. He ends up playing a total of 1,096 games, 484 goals, which is 52nd overall, 637 assists, which is 76th overall, 1,121 points, which is 63rd overall in NHL history. In the playoffs, in 76 games, 29 goals, 45 assists, 74 points. He would be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1989. Of course, February 7th of 1976, he scored 6 goals, 4 assists for 10 points in a game against the Boston Bruins, a game which has been talked about a lot, where it was a goaltender who got lit up in Boston that I believe it was his first NHL game, Dave Reese. So that had to be a tough one, and being told by Don Cherry, yeah, you're in there, you're not coming out, it's a story Don's told plenty of times, but it's still, it's got to be tough. But that 10 points, that's 76, so that helps him get to the 100-point mark for the first time. 10 points in a game will do that for you. So long career, very successful. And again, I think the fact that his numbers stayed up even when he wasn't getting along with the people running the team tells you a lot about the professional he was. So it's nice to see that his relationship with the Leafs has been mended, that he has been a part of various celebrations over the last few years especially, and that the era that was back then is gone as well. I know there's people who want to dunk on the Leafs and their whole not winning in the first round. I would take this era over the one in the 70s and 80s. It was a tough time for Toronto, and Sitler was one of those very rare, moment. Like basically for Toronto fans, there wasn't a lot of hope back then, but Sitler was one of those guys that was a premier player in the league and somebody they built around, along with, of course, Lanny McDonald, Borje Salming being another. There will be a Salming video a couple weeks from now. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.